This episode of our This Week in XR podcast is sponsored by Zapper. Zapper is one of the world's leading XR companies. Over the past 12 years, they've won numerous awards for memorable campaigns. They've democratized AR by making tools and SDKs that anyone can use. And they created ZapBox, the world's most affordable mixed reality headset. Most recently, Zapper worked with Unilever to create an enhanced QR code called Accessible QR, which enables packaged goods to speak to the blind and partially sighted. If you're thinking XR, give the team at Zapper a call or visit zapper.com to see how they can help you on your XR journey. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink. I'm here with Ted Schilowitz for This Week in XR. It's October 4th, 2024, and we have as our guest today Antony Batt and Neville Spiteri, the founders of Wevr, or Wevr, as I call them. And they created one of the great VR experiences and other things. They just raised some money, so I'm looking forward to catching up with them and finding out what productions they have teed up.
They are part of our OG crowd, Charlie. I've been friends with them forever and
I know.
have been advising their company for years. And there's an interesting backstory there of the survivors of VR. I think that's your next book, Charlie.
We've been through, survivors of VR. That is actually a good idea.
I think it is a good idea.
Also, before we get started with the news and bringing in Wevr, I want to apologize to our listeners for some of our technical problems the last few episodes. I guess it's been going on for a while. We are trying to address the sound issue. I know you would think three tech guys could work that out, but bear with us and keep your finger on that volume button. Hopefully, I thought it was resolved,
and I have been definitely working on my mic technique
I'm like, the microphone is now about 3 feet from my mouth.
I think we figured that part out. It's just the rest of it not out.
I should put on my headphones for sound bleed.
You sound great today to me.
Rony's not here because of the Jewish holiday. As you can see, Ted and I, although we also are Jewish, are not quite as observant as our friend Rony. So getting straight to the news, it looks like Tim Cook as well as Samsung are having second thoughts about pass-through, having seen the Orion see-through device. I don't know whether these rumors are true, but it wouldn't surprise me because both of those companies, I think, are far from an affordable device, just like Meta is because of physics.
Yeah. From what I understand, certainly Apple has been working on both techniques for some time. And my instinct is that they are accelerating the ultralight pass-through, find the use case for this. Although I would not put it past Apple to just abandon the sector. This is maybe a little shocking for a lot of our listeners, but Apple is really good at picking up sort of humanity cues. And when they feel like something is just a little too exotic to ever go mainstream, they sometimes bail early. Like they'll just leave the sector and maybe work on it as a small engineering project in the sort of dark corners. But it may be years before we see anything else from them after the ultimate sort of not really getting any traction.
I had a great conversation with somebody over there who obviously I can't name, but he said they were deeply divided about releasing a development device just for developers that perhaps they would vet somewhat and going big. And he said that they were bitterly divided. There were constant debates until the word came down. We're releasing it as a product and we're done discussing it.
Right.
Which I think really hit a lot of people pretty hard because now we're in I told you so mode. And they really can't say that. So I do sense that there's going to be some soul searching over there about what exactly they're doing and what their roadmap is.
And I think, look, the idea of putting a Mac on your face with all the joy that everybody that's ever used a Mac has had is 100% right. And they should continue to pursue that path. I just think they need to relook at their hardware personnel, their hardware philosophy, and start to rethink that and rework that. And if they learn something from their efforts, I think Apple will come out with something that will be fantastic on both sides of the equation. I think they got the visual very much right. They got the software experience very much right for a daily use, kind of like, I just want all the stuff I do with my Mac and I want to wear it here. The UI is incredible. I mean, the dollars and effort they must have spent on it is enormous. But the headwear is so challenged that it gets lost. And hopefully they just understand that they got it half right. Now they just have to get the other half right, you know?
So let's hit the news real quick. Microsoft confirms that the HoloLens is no more. They're going to stop supporting the one in
Yeah.
December and the two 2 years from now. A company called Future Trash. First of all, Future Trash, congrats. They raised $5 million and they're building experiences in Fortnite.
Mm.
And then we have, by the way, our Jonathan Riz Friedman, who was on the show
Yeah, last week. Yeah.
last week, just announced, along with Heidi Klum, the launch of Modelverse on Roblox.
Mm.
So you can imagine that is going to be a pretty popular place for 12-year-old boys, and I think Roblox may have a few of them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if that generational link actually works. Like, is it does
I don't know.
her
I don't know if they know who Heidi Klum is.
yeah, I was gonna say,
They
does her
know, but
celebrity
they know
matter?
what models are.
Yeah, does her celebrity matter, or is it better to have a whole, or maybe she's just gonna be the front person for a whole crew of young YouTube influency
One of the
Roblox influencer
one
folks?
one of the
Guess we'll see.
obvious dumb things about AOL in the 90s was that our biggest channel was the model channel under fashion. Like they found it and it was all guys.
Oh, guys.
So there's a company called Runware AI, and it is they raised $3 million from A16Z and others for this generative AI platform. So it generates images and they're instant. So it's instant stable diffusion using the Flux model,
Hmm.
and it's instant. Now you have limited control. You don't have as many controls as you have on Minimax and other uh, top image generators. Pika, Runway. Pika just launched a new version also, which people are having a lot of fun with and posting their brains out
Yeah.
on X. So if you've ever wanted to do image generation and you never wanted to spend the time, head over to Runware AI and just, type in some fun prompts like a spaceship lands in the jungle. Scrolling right along, our friends at Infinite Reality are going to acquire Super League. So
Hmm.
Infinite Reality has got a kind of roll up going here where they're going to take all these small and successful media plays and roll them up into something large enough to go public so that people can have an exit. Because a lot of these companies, even if they make a few $1 million a year, they're not going to go public. They don't have the scale. So, Infinite Reality, I think, is doing an interesting thing. They're going to, I think, be heard from a lot in the coming year or two because there are too many companies that are just getting by marginally and have no hope of scaling. I mean, our enterprise sector is just in a state of not scaling. It supports a few small companies, but it is not scaling as we thought it would in before the pandemic.
Yeah. Interesting.
Uh, Let's see, what else have we got going on here? Oh, shout out to my friends and colleagues at Shenandoah University. They have released a little time travel experience where you go to Constitution Hall in 1789 and you hear the founding fathers debate. They went and scanned all the statues, so they think they have pretty good likenesses of them, and of course, actors using that, doing their voices, and you sort of stand in the gallery and get to watch. So I thought it was a neat idea. It's great for a university to do. It's taken them like 4 years to pull this off. It's a cross-disciplinary feat. So congrats to those guys. And it looks like we have Neville in the waiting room. Let's bring Neville in. And perhaps they're together.
That is possible because they do work together.
Hey, Charlie and Ted.
Hey,
Hey,
Neville.
Neville, how are you?
Doing all right. How are you?
Good. We're looking for your partner in crime. Is he on his way?
He should be. He's been on text. Let me text him right now.
Neville and I just had lunch a couple weeks ago and talked about all kinds of interesting things in our fascinating space of
Well, you can
future of
pick it
entertainment.
right up there and share with us what's going on.
Neville, we were just talking this morning, Charlie and I were saying, we should do a book called The Survivors of Virtual Reality. And three plus when Antony comes on, we are in that club in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely, and very happy to be survivors and build some
I
good.
mean, the alternative is not great.
Yeah,
No, it is not.
exactly.
And plus lots of benefits from all the lessons learned over the years. And then as we thought 10 years ago, it's not going away. I think
Right.
it keeps getting incrementally more interesting and lots more opportunities for
Yeah,
everyone.
because we all know, as the three of us know, it's a valid form of entertainment that continues to emerge and continues to sort of tweak itself and find its fits in the world. I think the three of us would be, very well. We should just probably march away, and then when Antony joins, he could join another
He can
conversation.
join. Sounds great.
I
Yeah.
think the three of us would be very candid about this fact, and I was talking about this morning, is that this form of medium may never become mainstream in the way that other forms of medium have become, right? It may always live on a little bit of the side of exotic. And there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that, as long as you understand what these exotic forms will do. Like, I theatrically look at IMAX, right?
Yep.
And there's real IMAX, true IMAX that exists in science centers in a few places around the world. And then there's a version of IMAX that they tried to sort of go into sort of full commercial with, which had some partial degree of success. But at the
Yep.
end of the day, real IMAX is exotic. And what we in the industry call LIMAX is not, right? It's just a bigger screen in a normal multiplex with a little better sound. And there's a separation between that. And I think that's interesting. And now we were just in the mix of talking some philosophy, Antony.
So why don't we start at the beginning, which we almost never do, and talk about, first of all, I don't know whether you're Weaver or WeVR.
Weaver.
When did you,
Weaver.
when was the company founded? How did you come to make the blue? I know that for those of you who don't know what the blue is, I think everybody does, but it was a very short experience that was on the HTC Vive when it was released. And it is very immersive. You are a diver on the deck of a sunken ship. Whales are swimming by. You're surrounded by fish. It's obviously 360 experience, and it's beautiful. And then a few years later, I guess you were commissioned by Dreamscape, or they licensed from you the Blue and created more of a free roam adventure game, if you will. And although Dreamscape has closed, I'm interested in the fate of that particular IP.
Yeah,
And
I may know something about that. I may not be able to be allowed to say it, but if
oh,
never,
Ted, you and
did I
Rony
say
drive
it?
me crazy with this shit.
That's
The
I
two
may
of
know. I
them,
may know a little bit
Rony
about
has
that
a
connection.
secret that he can't tell you. He was born that way.
Yeah, exactly.
funny.
So,
Well,
so, so, come on, we're going to turn it over to you two. Give us a lecture on the history and future of Weaver.
amazing. Thank you so much. It's great to be talking to you guys 10 years later. We are celebrating our 10-year anniversary right now since we first really dove into immersive XR and back in 2014. We had actually founded the company 3 years prior to that with the ambition of building a next generation digital studio. We didn't even know what that meant, to be honest. But we definitely kind of had a sense that there is, new devices, new technology, new formats emerging, real time, 3D, and we wanted to be, front and center of that. But yeah, 2014 was a very catalyzing year for us because, it really started with the demo up at Valve when we were in that infamous, the room demo where we got to really experience presence for the first time, and something got etched into our brains in that demo that has been with us since. And Collins, that was the beginning of the journey. That really sort of inspired us to really kind of dive deep into what it means to present media that is now fully embodied and tied so directly to your perception. Um, and we had already been working on this ocean simulation, which was very near and dear to our hearts. Anthony and Scott Yara, third co-founder at the company at the time when we first started, and it was really a passion project. It started out with the idea of like, okay, what if the World Wide Web, what if the internet could be this beautiful thing where we could have sort of species and habitats and kind of beautiful ocean life that's sort of swimming all over the internet from device to device and how could we make that be a collaborative project? That was a lot of the thinking that kind of first started uh, Wevr. But then when we got our chance at checking out the DK1, we were like, holy shit, there's something really powerful about this medium. It would seem like an ocean simulation is really a good use case for immersive. So after that room scale demo at Valve, we literally dove deep, no pun intended, and put together that first demo, Charlie, which you mentioned, that we still hear from people today. They still love it and enjoy it as a first experience in VR. So that's a little bit about where we started.
It's iconic. I mean, that is one of the iconic touch points of that phase, that era of virtual reality, is something that was so connected to the visuals and sort of how it made you feel, that you felt you were underwater, and when that whale passed by you and its eye was really big and it kind of gave you a little glance, it's a special moment. Like, it's a spatial moment in my head, just like these.
Yeah, you don't forget that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Very much so. And Jake Crowell, the director at the time, he fell in love with the medium, and we kind of honed in on the fact that yes, there's a sense of presence and feeling like you're there with whatever else is being presented. That transportive aspect. We thought that looking a whale in the eye would be a good way to express that. So. Yeah, that's where we started. And 10 years later, I mean, we've been at it. Anthony can share his perspective, but we're at it today, stronger and better than ever, and really encouraged.
You guys raised some money recently.
We did. We got a nice healthy top up from our long-standing backers, Epic Games and HTC. And that kind of allows us to continue the journey and also continue to push the boundaries and explore like where is it meaningful to collaborate with artists and creatives in 2024, 10 years later. And we're excited about a number of productions which are in play right now, which, like Ted, unfortunately can't quite announce them yet, but there's some announcements coming up very soon here which we can talk about.
So let's give Anthony a chance to chime in. He's watching and listening along, and he's obviously had a very critical role to play in all this.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the conversation and just reminiscing on the Blue, because it was a fun time to make an impact. It was we knew we had a whale simulation that was running on actually an ocean simulation like Neville's talking about, and we just kind of intuitively knew that size in VR was a way to express it fully, right? And to try to really land that. And I think, with all like, I feel like I'm never satisfied with anything I make or anything I'm involved in, at all. And I was like, yeah, that's really cool. But when everyone just started seeing it, it was just so easy to get people in it. It was like, we knew like, wow, that's like, we nailed that. You know what I mean? And it felt good. And it felt, I think more importantly, I think Ted, you were kind of mentioning, was like, it's iconic. It became iconic as a result of people, because everyone was trying it. It was easy. And that felt like we really did want to make an impact. Like, we did want to have a statement about, hey, we're going to be here. We're going to create here. We think it's an important medium for a lot of reasons. And it was great to sort of have this piece kick that off for us. And then we followed it up with like, dozens of other experiences and experiments that we've been doing in the studio. So it's been a good ride.
So let me ask you this question, because there are very few people that could postulate on this like the four of us. Because we've all been in this for such a long time. Do you think that the last, call it 10 to 12 years of this medium, the amount of funding that was put into the trying to make this mainstream sort of led it down the wrong garden path, that it would have been better to be much tighter funded, much more underground, much more festival oriented, smaller amounts of funding, to find these kind of hit moments more organically, rather than trying to push this into an investment thesis and this is the next big media moment, and suddenly these large tech companies are pouring huge amounts of dollars into it, trying to grow something so big so fast that it just sort of tumbles in on itself.
Yeah.
And we're sort of back to square one again. I'm curious, because you guys would have a lot of time under the hood to postulate around that. I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I could jump in on that. I mean, I feel like investment dollars sort of force things to go from boutique to scale. So like, and so like the corner coffee shop that has all that patina and community, someone wants to turn it into like Starbucks like in like 18 months, which just sort of like makes it like not good, right? Um and we like I think all of us were like sort of in that blast off period when everyone wanted the new frame, the new medium. And I think some of the conversation around that was positive, that like we always just say make brave VR. Like we really wanted brave people to kind of step into it. And so we still stand by that, I think. But yeah, trying to turn it into like turning it into a business at the scale that was required based on the commensurate with investment dollars, is frankly unholy in a way, right? Like things need to like kind of build and develop and create into it. And I'll kind of give it a music reference. Like I was really active in the indie music scene in the 90s. They used to call it grunge. And I was booking bands like Soundgarden really early. No one heard of Soundgarden. No one heard of Seattle. It was like, but like at that time, it kind of was indie and alternative, and no one knew about it. And it took time for it to grow. And then when Nirvana finally released their Geffen record, it exploded and then it went mass, but it had time to create, Bleach and then Nevermind, and Soundgarden had the time to build two records on Rhino. It had figured itself out a little bit. VR like went from like, hey, there's DK1 to like, we're gonna have these mega studios step right in, and it didn't allow it to have time to like creatively make some errors and adjust and build and get that ground. So I would prefer it to have had more time to sort of grow into like what it can, I think ultimately can be. I'll pause there.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I think that I agree with pretty much every piece of that. Neville, do you find the same sense of it?
Absolutely, absolutely. What I will say though is that with such a sort of kind of a quantum leap tech format, it does require huge amounts of investment, and I think that we're actually collectively grateful. I think that even companies like Meta still to this day continue to invest heavily in the space, because
if it were not for Meta,
it needs it. It needs it, right?
If it were not for Meta, none of us would be sitting here right now.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's true. That's
so.
And let me also, if I might, just step in and put on my Professor Charlie hat and share the quick 90-second history of VR as I see it, because I was in VR in the 90s when we were using modified flight simulators. So, and that led to the Aladdin simulation. So that's how early that was. And cool. We were networking people together, but then, and we had these simulation centers called Virtual World. We had opened 33 of them in 36 months, which is insane for commercial real estate, which tends to operate at the speed of the Department of Motor Vehicles. And, that was a thing for a while, but then the internet came along. And our audience in particular was mesmerized by it because they were all first adopters and gamers and people you would find at GamesCon, wearing BattleTech uniforms. and just like completely giving themselves to the game. So it was very popular at the time, but then the internet came along and the audience kind of got interested in a different shiny object. By the way, that company had a very happy ending. Microsoft bought the programming team, and Dave and Buster's got the simulators and operated them into the 2000s. So all of that was great. But that was the limit of VR in the 90s.
Yeah.
The headsets were like, the fake space boom.
Mhm.
I remember I saw that thing in 1992, and it was so heavy it had to be cantilevered, and you couldn't wear it. You held the sides of it and leaned your head into it. So that's how primitive VR was, and I think at some point we all realized that, and people went and did different things, right? Jordan Weissman went to Microsoft, I went to AOL, and we all sort of thought the dream of, really creating a place that you could inhabit with other people, which was so exciting about what we were doing. Right. And we weren't networking people into the sky. You were like driving a mech on a planet so you could see your buddy and talk to him while he's in his vehicle. So, not to over explain that, but that was the limit of what it was. And the rest of it was in laboratories. And in the 2000s and early aughts, you had people like Nani De La Pena who were hacking iPhones and other things together to try and make a VR headset. And along came Palmer Luckey, who figured out how to do it with smartphones and iPhone screens. And when Oculus was purchased by Meta in 2014, sort of I felt the world shift,
Mm.
right? And so
Yeah.
because it wasn't, I
Absolutely.
thought Oculus before that, I hadn't tried it, but it sounded pretty sucky. So, and again, my experience was everybody's going to get sick and, it'll be another nice try. But when Meta bought them, it was hugely
Yeah,
legitimizing. And,
Yeah.
you had people
absolutely.
like John Carmack running around raving about it.
Absolutely.
And so
And
it created an
yeah,
environment where other investors felt like, oh, geez, Meta's putting in billions. Maybe we ought to get in on this shit.
Yeah, we'll get back
And
to it.
so there was an expectation. The Vive came out first. And I remember when finally the first Oculus was released. And it was one of the most disappointing days of my life. I unpacked that thing with great anticipation. I had upgraded my PC, and guys, it sucked. It really fucking
yeah,
sucked. And that pulled the carpet out from everybody. And
yeah.
so began VR winter, right? I mean, it's sort of like people were investing. I think you guys got started. People were
Yeah.
finding money, and everybody thought, "Oh my God, we're going to make content for this new device, and tens of millions of them are going to be sold." Never mind that there did not exist tens of millions of gaming PCs that would have supported VR at that time.
True.
So
I know.
VR winter started in 2017, following, or let's say the beginning of 2018, following the complete failure of the first Oculus. It is actually kind of amazing that Meta they just viewed that as a minor obstacle toward their goals. Any other
Yeah.
company would have bailed out. Any other
Yeah.
company would have said, "Well, we made a mistake. We're right off the $3 billion because we make $15 billion a quarter, and we'll just write that off as a crazy idea that we took a flyer on." But no, no, they spend $80 billion and counting making it a real thing. And so, first of all, the pandemic really helped them. It really helped VR. I spent a lot of time in headset. I know that
Hmm.
Ed did too.
Mhm.
And I think it brought VR back. We
Yeah.
really benefited because VR is fantastic. If we have to be apart, it is a great way to be together.
Absolutely.
And so, I think that led to another wave of investment. So then, with the introduction and popularity of the Quest, at least its first couple of years, brought investors back.
Yep.
And now, the Quest has kind of hit a wall in terms of its growth, which is what happened to the Sony PlayStation. And of course, we've had certainly a tech recession, which hit VR particularly hard. And but now we seem to be coming out of that again. And again, it's thanks to the persistence of Meta doing things that no other company in history would ever do. They are going to will this medium into existence. But they are a victim, as we all are, of the laws of gravity. And gravity is that people do get nauseous, and gravity is that we don't have our Game of Thrones that makes people say, I have to do that. I don't care what the barriers are. I don't care what the friction is. And we don't have that experience yet. We have a lot of cool experiences that people like when they do them. But those experiences have not yet created a phenomenon like the Nintendo Switch, which Nintendo is very about because it only sold 75 million units. And you look at the PlayStation, it sold 150 million PlayStation 4s. And so, we got a ways to go here. Things seem to be on the upswing. I think people have realized it isn't a gaming box. It doesn't deliver the gaming thing. We need to find things that are native to the medium. And I think that was sort of bringing it back to you guys. Sorry for the digression, but bringing it back to you guys, I think the pendulum has shifted again, thanks to Meta, to non-game ideas for XR. And what is the application like Walkabout Mini Golf, I think is the most popular.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
it's because it is a multiplayer game, because you can explore, they mix in this weird desire that we have for mastery on top of all of it, because you can get incrementally better as you play. But it's so much fun. Ted and I were in there with the founder of Mighty Coconut, Lucas Martel. And we even filmed an episode of the podcast in there, and it was great.
Yeah.
And it was great. And, we forget how great it can be. And so if we had more experiences like that, I think we wouldn't have to worry so much about the hardware.
Yeah, I think targeting the gamer seems very logical, but I think you're also sort of saying, Charlie, it sounds that like there might be a different user that really wants sort of like these walkabout like moments that are sort of like community driven, but they're not necessarily only gaming. There's also this other attribute, which is like deeply human, but you're separated by continents being in VR, which I think is unique to that medium versus watching your player walk the screen as you're chatting with other people. I think it's just that's a unique thing that's endemic to the medium, which I think needs to be explored. And I think Meta's actually, I think, recognizing that. I don't know if that's what you're hearing, but it seems like they're looking
totally. I think that look, Meta made a mistake that we all would have made sitting in the executive suite at Meta, which is gamers are first adopters. So let's make sure that our first adopter device has lots of content for them. And they started on that right away with the original Oculus.
Yeah.
And they've continued that all the way till now. But I think what they realized at a certain point was gamers don't like these games as much as they like console games. There's too much friction. There's not enough hours of gameplay in it. It's too expensive per hour, right? A typical game, users pay 25 to 50 cents an hour for that entertainment. And, on the Quest, it's several dollars. So I think what they realized, that it took a couple of years, was, the sweet spot is not going to be gaming.
Yeah, and I think that in retrospect,
the sweet spot is something else.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, right, and Ted, maybe you're going to expand on the same point. Like since VR started in PC, it kind of made sense, right, that gaming would be where you'd start. In fact, it was Valve, the game company, right, where
exactly.
The original tech came from.
The thing is supported by Steam, so
absolutely,
the assumption is it's like a PC game.
Makes perfect sense that it started there, and then I think, even in the early days of mobile VR, right, it was Beat Saber that really caught fire. Yeah. So there was another key data point or inflection point to kind of stay centered around gaming, which I think if you look at the game tape, if we look back, let's say 10 years from now, I would say that was probably a really smart idea to invest in gaming first, because there's a natural proclivity of game developers and gamers being early adopters of tech, etc., all of that. But we've all had a hunch that the center for this new medium is not necessarily games or only games from the beginning, right? Which is why there's been interest in, narrative and storytelling and also in sort of native interactivity that's sort of embodied because of the device can allow that in a way that games don't. And I think it was also interesting that, the data showed that fitness, for example, which was not a category when we first started, we're like, no, I don't think people are going to work out with a
Who wants
thing
to get all
strapped on
sweaty
them.
with a headset on?
Right. But, that was completely unexpected, at least to me. It was like,
Yes, 100%.
right.
100%, Neville. I think
Yes.
the device is kind of teaching them what it is, right? That
Yeah.
Right.
people are in real time saying training and simulation is what I want. And
Yes.
Well,
I want to, and I think that now that they have that realization, yeah, there are gaming aspects to that, but what you really want to do is have presence in other places doing activities that you would do in real life.
Well, and it's interesting that that was a bit of a surprise moment for you because I think out of all the things in the sector, that was actually the least surprising to me because I saw when VR started to move to all-in-one VR, get rid of the cables, get rid of all the exotic, like hang the sensors and stuff, that this would be a modern Wii. This would
Mm.
be
Mhm.
what the Wii would evolve into is you don't hang the screen on the wall, you wear the screen, it's more immersive. And the idea of, Twitch style gaming on a controller would move to something more organic where you're playing simulation based games. This is big sort of my kind of VR thesis is that's why Beat Saber became such a big hit is it's a Wii game in VR and why
Yeah.
Supernatural works and why the boxing sims work.
Yeah, no,
Because
look at the golf simulations.
yeah, it's just
And
better
as
in VR because you feel like you're more into it, right? And I think like Anthony's point's really interesting about the grunge movement, sort of starting from the basement and from the grunge clubs, and then sort of exploding into the almost mainstream, and then almost sort of like finding its way back to its hole in the
Yeah.
most lovely way possible. And I think VR is maybe going through that arc as well because we can talk about this and find these moments of critique about the whole arc of virtual reality as a consumer level device and business. But that being said, there are many, many, many successes and people that have made multi-million-dollar careers, many hundreds of people, not just three or four, that are doing quite well. And there are a few
sure, well, we
hits.
just had the Gorilla Tag on,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Phil
exactly.
Smith.
Perfect example.
And
Right.
that guy basically was like a programmer who was a gamer. And he
Yeah.
was like, oh, I can make a better game than this.
Right. So at the end of the day, VR is just like any other entertainment medium. 95% of this stuff is going to be meaningless. It's going to be interesting from a creative or an engineering standpoint, but it's not going to find an audience. 5% will find an audience, and 2 or 3% of that 5% will become significant hits that will return both financial investment and creative investment and allure to the medium that continues us down the path.
But
Right?
it
No
has
different
to
than any other entertainment medium.
happen. It has to happen at a much larger scale.
Yeah.
I do like the analogy you made earlier though to IMAX that it's sort of it's a special format and it may continue to be a special format potentially for some time before it's kind of truly mainstream at the level that I think Charlie you're alluding to, but there's plenty to do while
Oh, yeah.
it's niche, like the early days of movie theaters, right? People would go to watch movies in a movie theater. That happened for quite a long time before we had television in our homes. And so, actually COVID was a real damper because after those early years, like we really saw that actually maybe it is in location based dedicated spaces where VR will really find its roots and people will actually go out and have a good time with their friends. And that actually, now that we're post-COVID, we're seeing location-based as a very fertile ground for
Yeah.
building very successful products that can generate revenue and feed lots of mouths and really continue to help the industry evolve.
Well, that's great. That was my good segue to my next question, which
Okay.
is, we've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure we find out what you guys are working on. You raised some money. What's the plan?
Yeah, well, I'm plus 9 hours from West Coast right now. I'm currently in Malta, which is an island, a country in Europe. Currently working on a production, which we'll be able to announce here in the next few weeks. And it's a lot of, Unreal Engine development, a lot of sort of looking at digital twins, immersion, full immersion, VR, multi-format, looking at LED screens. And so we're very active on a number of different productions right now. And it's largely at the moment, all in the LBE space. There's a couple of projects we're doing which we think will do really well online as well. But I went to Paris a few months ago, and there were like 3 or 4 different LBE VR experiences that I checked out, which were all really compelling. There were lines out there, and they're running for a while. They're making money. And I think there's a real reason for that, right? So the shift to mobile, the shift to the all-in-one format, the ease of access of these devices now, the throughput problem is largely solved, so you can actually build a commercially viable, business
How was the
around.
fruit throughput issue solved?
Well, I'll give you an example. So when we developed the Harry Potter location-based VR project with Warner Brothers during COVID, Anthony will elaborate further on that. We could only it required a backpack. Tracking was, all based on cameras, so you had a limited space, and it was cumbersome, and you could only get, 20, maybe 40 people.
Yeah, it takes like 6, 7
per
minutes
hour.
to doff and don the gear for each attendant, for each person that goes through the
Right,
experience.
and they have to be wiped down and
Costly, yeah.
stuff. Although they don't
Absolutely.
bother with those niceties at Sandbox. So
Well, I mean, but so you look at the revenue per square foot, and it didn't make sense. It didn't make any sense. So, like, a retailers would be like, "I'd rather sell T-shirts versus
Right.
have a VR experience here." That's completely different now because you can actually get 100 plus people per hour in a reasonable space, and
100
all of a
plus
sudden
people per
per
hour. How many
hour.
people in the simulation?
So there are a few different formats. We're exploring with the idea that typically, like Sandbox, right? You're probably going out with your friends or a family, maybe groups of
Sure.
six to 10 feels like the sweet spot, right? You can have multiple groups at the same time in the simulation, but really you're really interacting with probably a group of 6 to 10. I'm sure there's other versions that can work as well, but that's sort of where we're finding good feedback.
So are there so you create these experiences and then you go to places like IAPA and try and find partners who want to license them, or what is the plan there when you say LBE? Do you have a distribution plan, or is it something you're going to make a great experience and then find one?
No, definitely the distribution is a key part of it. So right now we're working with partners in Asia and looking at also Europe, and we expect North America will follow soon after. And there's a number of sort of distribution deals and discussions around how we get that deployed. We've chosen as a studio to stay more focused on the creative, going from concept to the executed experience, but then partner with operators that are actually out there and regionally managing the experience. And that's sort of where we're heading currently. But yeah, having the distribution deal in place from the get-go is critical. So I mean, that's where our first really toe dip into the space was with Dreamscape, as you were mentioning earlier, when we partnered with them to take the blue, and that was the plan. I would say that plan is still more valid today than it was back then. COVID and various other challenges unfortunately led to some of those companies to have to pivot.
I
But
could jump in here. I mean, we
yeah,
like the thing that we made with Harry Potter, like we made a flight simulator for flying a broom over London and battling. I don't, Charlie, I don't, or Ted, I don't know if you guys ever got on the
I did.
stage and I
I
showed it
did
to
it.
you guys.
I did it over here in Burbank when they were
Got
running.
it. That's awesome. So, like,
Yeah, I liked it quite a lot. It
that's
was in
great.
their retail location in Manhattan, right?
Yes,
Correct.
yeah, that's where we launched it. But the idea there, like we always planned with Warner Brothers, was like, we were going to be very boutique because it was like the Harry Potter store. But the idea was like actually go worldwide with it. Um, the brooms, we could have put 150 brooms in a single room and had 150 riders jump on it. I mean, there was no constraint on that because it was a seating experience. And we actually think that the numbers at the Harry Potter store, it's sold out. I mean, there was very few times where you could get a ticket for either one of those things. So I think for us, like we're not a distributor, so we're a creator, and so we're always going to be partnering with people. But I think it's actually a smart time for brands like the Harry Potters or the Spider-Man's to kind of say like, well, what are we doing for fans that are all around the world that would want to come? And it's like, again, it's not something you're going to do every day. It's going to be something that you do maybe once.
Well,
with your
when you
friends.
talk about, the ability to call it 100, 150 people simultaneously in a giant soundstage level space and run them all with individual headsets, you start to get to this kind of coalescent of what a giant theme park simulator is, right? And
Yeah,
it's just a choice on what technology you want to use to display the visuals. Because if you go on the Avatar
yep,
simulator at the Animal Kingdom, it's basically that experience. You're on this little sawhorse kind of sixed off moving haptic platform, and then you're surrounded by the world's biggest VR headset. And
yep,
the trick is that they put about 190 people in every 4 minutes, right? Because the ride is 3.5 minutes long and they cycle in and out so quickly,
yep.
because you don't have to even put something on and level it on their heads. But the reason why it works is because it's tied to a whole bunch of other experiences that you're committing to with your family for the day. I think that's part of one of the biggest challenges with LBE is how to make it important and dedicated enough. This is what Neville and I talked a lot about when we were together, to make it a day of entertainment, not a little aside to whatever else you're doing that day. And once you crack that code, VR becomes the new theme park. And I think that's a mission that we've all been on for many years. It's
Yeah.
just we keep chipping away at it, right? And
Yeah.
I think we will find it sooner or later. I think we find little bits of it. And
Yeah.
the Harry Potter experience is a good point of that. Dreamscape was a good sort of everything tests the boundaries.
Well, if you could put
and then either succeeds or
150
fails.
brooms in a single room, now you're talking like Disney type scale.
Yeah, now you're
That's
talking
what
to
you're
Disney
saying.
level entertainment, right?
Yeah,
Right,
because
right.
you have to put 3,000 people a day through there.
More,
Absolutely.
Yeah, or more.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Well,
what
yeah,
the time we
and
have.
studios have that capability, right? Like, so it's like Ted. I think you're right. It's like, how are you entertaining the person? Is it a headset or is it a fixed screen? I feel like VR affords the user a little bit more agency, and it's just a little different than sitting. Although I love actually Neville and I when we were working on the Harry Potter thing, we went out and saw the that project you were talking about, the Avatar ride, and we were like pretty blown away. Like
Yeah,
we
it's
thought that was
unbelievable.
like
Yeah.
It's a passage,
the
yeah.
great use of technology. It was super fun. I mean, the line, but I'll challenge you. The line was just ridiculous. It was like
Yeah.
so
3.5 hours, right?
yeah, 3.5
Almost
hours. So
4 hours, yeah.
I feel like that's the argument against the theme parks, because I actually feel like where I think where groups of people want to do is they want to dip into something. They want to take some photos. They want to hang. They don't want to wait in line for 3 hours. They don't want to be in a big, gigantic theme park. They want to dip into something in a city, have fun, and dip out and go eat and do something else. I think the
Yeah, I mean,
entertainment user doesn't want
I'll
to be locked
postulate with
into
you
things.
guys in the time that we have left about like, is there a new formula for a theme park attraction where the pre-show is one form of virtual or mixed reality with people's devices that they're in a big room waiting to go to the main attraction, and then 7 minutes later they either take that same headset and move into the next room, or they take off that headset and put on a more advanced headset and do the main attraction. And now the next group of 100 people is putting on the first headset and cycling through the pre-show, right? So that is also very Disney-esque how you manage lines. And you're right, the line dynamics, which by the way is also part of the technique of making it special, right? So
Sure.
there's this weighing factor of what the line is for and how to manage the crowds. But I think there's an interesting kind of chemistry around the pre-show and the main show. And if you could build 7 or 8 attractions that do that in a theme park environment, you may have the theme park of the future. It is possible. So it's interesting to explore.
That is actually a great insight, Ted.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Exactly. Next step in our
we are doing
our
it.
survivor.
We're on it.
Our survivor culture.
Well, Neville and Anthony, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great to catch up with you guys, as always. And Ted, I'll see you back here next Friday.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everybody.
See you, Charlie.
Thanks, guys. See you guys soon.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for the time.
Bye.